Hello, hello. Good evening, beautiful people. Good evening. Let's see here. Let's get squared away. Hi, Instagram. Happy Monday. Hello, Facebook and YouTube. It is Nicole Nash. Hello, hello. How's everyone doing tonight? Um, let's see here. Okie dokie. So we're streaming. Yeah, it never I always have to check. It never gets old quite yet, but it's only been I want to say about what 8 days, 9 days working on different streams. I'm trying to stretch, y'all. This is my stretching. So I'm challenging myself in different ways. I'm really excited. But hi, we're going to go ahead and get started and just come on in the room and just introduce yourself when you're here. Let us know how your Monday's been going, but yeah, we're just gonna get started. So I'm Nicole Nash. I'm a licensed mental health therapist. Let's see. So right now we are in the midst of 30 days, 30 ways to level up your healing. It's time for another healing challenge. We are on day 9. So how has it been? How was the first week? How's insight? Please leave your comments. If you're on YouTube, catch me. Just chime in down with the comment section. Instagram, chime in. Facebook, of course, chime in. But how was the first 8 days? We kind of process and start talking about, trauma roots, trauma fruits, as well as discussing, narratives, that sometimes form as a result of trauma seeds, which are your traumatic events that go down and they plant roots. And when we don't catch those roots, they build up a narrative. They tell us a story. They tell us a story. The narrative tells us the story about what is, was happening, and it really is about recognizing. And I say this, it's kind of like the matrix, like what if everything you knew was actually not accurate? And the thing is, and this is why we have to pay attention, like, especially if you find that you have some trauma roots that were built down during your childhood, the earlier in development that your roots actually were planted, the more you have to question it. Okay. But yeah, so we're just spent the first 8 days really talking about, that shifting as well. I want to again talk more about trauma with this particular healing challenge. And I want to go over because I realized I never really, you guys, if you're familiar with me, I'm a therapist. I help women and children. I'm shifting more to a specific area with women, and I realized I never kind of like update you all. And so I assist women in leadership heal and overcome any emotional wounds that's been caused by traumatic events, traumatic life events. And so I kind of would spend a moment here because I was like, you know, there's a reason why I'm having these conversations, especially now. And one thing I mentioned during like my first couple of them is that, it really is time for women in leadership to step up, and it's, I'm after the Ruths, the Esthers, the Deborahs. If you're familiar with the Bible, these were some significant, influential, impactful women of their time, but they all had a backstory. And one thing we talked about last week is that God said that He can use anybody with a backstory. It doesn't matter, right? But we have to get to a point to understand that our backstory does give us context, but it does not have to define our future. We're still purposeful, right? And so, I wanted to go into depth as far as who this message is for. Can anyone benefit from this? Exactly, yes, because trauma and mental health does not discriminate, unfortunately. We just live in a broken world, right? But this message is specifically for my women in leadership. And that's why I want to talk about trauma. And you're like, well, why would I bring up? And I'm going to ask y'all this, why would I bring up trauma when it comes to women in leadership? I'm going to be posing that all throughout tonight because I really want us to think about how trauma can impact your role as a leader, where you know it or not. Any kind of thing that has been unresolved, unhealed, it can impact you. And it's so critical if you are a leader. And we're going to get into that. But yes, I just want to get into kind of what that is. So again, I'm here to help women, especially in leadership, overcome any traumatic life events that may cause woundedness, which really can impact their areas of leadership, but also other domains, their personal life, their relationships, their academia, any other areas you may find that trauma can like creep in. So yeah, I just want to give that. Tonight, I wanted to go different. So if y'all read the title, The title was The Key to Facing and Overcoming the Very Trauma that played your family. So hi, so definitely catch the replay, but we're talking about trauma tonight, so definitely chime in if you like, but we're going to be getting nitty gritty into the trauma. And so tonight I wanted to get more into like the different definitions of trauma, because again, I want y'all to think about how trauma can impact you if you're a woman and in leadership. So, what I want to start by saying, and I'll be very transparent, like when I was thinking about how I kind of want to segue into this, because I've shared kind of details about my background and things like that, and I was just talking to God of how can I respectfully bring truth while still respecting family dynamics. Um, and one thing I wanted to say is because we've all been impacted in some shape or form just because it's a broken world. Hi, we've all been impacted by generational trauma, and I want to break that down. Personally, I have, I think, one of the best moms. Okay, the best mom. Um, but I also had to land on because of her backstory, it did impact me. And recognizing the and we call it like the trauma fruits that do not get addressed will create more trauma seeds. Because if you think about a fruit has seed, and the seed can get planted to create more. So we're going to get more into generational trauma. But one thing I had to recognize, and I had to use a lot of like fluidity in this sense, was recognizing that, do I honestly believe my mom, single parent, did the best she could? Yes. Like I said, I love my mom. She the best parent in the world. But also though, there was things that happened to her that was not her fault that I think impacted her parenting. So when we get into generational trauma or transgenerational trauma for tonight, I do want you guys to think about these are events that happen in one generation. However, the emotional distress, the psychological distress that happened to them, we get the aftermath of that in the next generation, or is passed down. And I'll give you an example. Let's say that one generation had to deal with war, and as a sense, they're very heightened. They're very, maybe hyper vigilant. And if they haven't like calmed their nervous system, if they haven't like resolved that trauma in any shape or form, they may find that it shows up in the next generation by how they move. So if they dealt with anxiety that was unmanaged, you may dealt at face in that next generation in that home, you may have faced the aftermath of the anxiety due to them being a refugee, or being affected or impacted by war. So that's what I mean when we talk about generational things. So anything that does not get addressed in one generation, it impacts the next generation. Okay. So in some shape or form, and like we can talk biblical here, like does the Bible mention, as far as generational stuff? Yes. Like to this day, we're still impacted by the decision of Adam and Eve. I mean, let's be real. We're more at a higher propensity to sin because of that original sin, right? But thank God, that Jesus, he came and he inserted that. So now we do have power and freedom. But I want to say we all, into a certain degree, we may experience the impact, whether directly or indirectly, of generational trauma. And so, why do I bring up generational trauma with leaders? I bring it up because one thing I can say personally and professionally, I saw how it impacted me in a leadership role, where I was, again, like I said, operating out of roots of shame, operating out of fear, sincere fear to disappoint. I didn't want to disappoint my parents. I didn't want to disappoint a lot of people. So that put me into this role where I was people pleasing, and I was a perfectionist, you know. And that was the aftermath. That was what I had to address and continue to address. And I'm gonna be real. I will say there's no perfect parent out here in this world, right? But the goal is to be more cognizant of what you bring to the table. So for me, it's not a matter of if, I'm gonna pass down some trauma. It's a matter of what I'm gonna do about it, and how, where I can do, be about it, and what I plan to do to address it, But I want to say that it's something that's going to occur. But the goal is we have to be aware of it in our lives and how it impacts. And one thing I've seen even professionally is I have leaders that show up, and when I say in all different areas, in religion, in business, in home care, in home, in the house, because if you're a caregiver, you are a leader in your home, right? Hi. but also in other different areas in medical, in business and things like that. We have leaders who they have to address because they're noticing, the areas where it's either professionally but also personally, they're noticing areas of lack. Again, we talked about that lack of, abundance, and they're noticing these areas. And one thing we do actually address a lot is both complex trauma and generational trauma. And one thing I found is that struggle when we get into generational trauma. So again, I had to go to God and be like, God, where do you what all do you want me to say that's respectful but still impactful and truthful, right? Because one thing I've seen professionally is when it comes to family, it's just a different beast. I'm gonna be real. When we deal with family, family is first of all our first exposure to structure, to love, to relationship, to fellowship, right? But what do you do when that family dynamics is infiltrated by different types of transgenerational trauma that even had nothing to do, like it wasn't the fault of your parents, wasn't even the fault of the parents' parents, right? But somehow, shape, we're now dealing with this. And where does it end? Right. And so I wanted to talk about this tonight, and I want to really land in because there gets to a point, especially if you're called to be a leader. First of all, if you are called to be a leader, I want to say why this message is for you is because you are a natural rule breaker. If you notice in your life, you are always different. You didn't quite fit in. You saw things differently. You spoke differently. Sometimes we call it the black sheep, the oddball. But you are always the one to set the tone. So why is generational trauma? Why am I bringing up generational trauma to leaders? It's because as a leader, you have the ability to set a different tone. The Bible does talk about curses and generational curses, because I was like, let me actually make sure I'm truthful here. But we do hear, like, even in Exodus where it says that God can bless or he can curse up to the third or fourth generation. However, his blessings impact thousands of generations at a time, right? So I want to be real that this is something that is like the spiritual bout. This is actually really real. And one thing I want to encourage as a leader to know that if you were the oddball, if you were called to be different, know that it's also a blessing in disguise because the very trauma that has plagued your family, you actually have been given the key, the path to do something different. You can break it. So I kind of want to go there tonight. If that's cool with everybody, I do want to kind of go there tonight. So here's the thing. What I want to lead with is throughout all my, like I said, the professional and the personal, is I want to give throughout this whole 30 days, I'm going to be giving different kind of, like, I call like different methods. But one method I want to really start us on is the arch method, and I'm gonna give you the A. We're gonna be breaking down the other the letters of this acronym, but I'm gonna give you the A, and I want to talk about the A. So arch, ARCH. The A stands for you have to address your past pain, and you first address it by you got to understand your history. So here's the thing. The enemy, he does deal in cycles. God deals with new beginnings, but the enemy loves to deal in cycles all the time. I'm gonna be real, right? And ignorance is not bliss. And the enemy, he banks for us to not be smart, right? And so one thing I always encourage my clients to do is, do you know your history? Because if you go down, there's a reason why your family's dealing with what they're dealing with, whether it's alcohol abuse, substance abuse, where's anger issues, whether it's a lack of of satisfaction, where's depression, where's anxiety, where's is a lack of stable relationships. There is some way down the line where something happened, a seed was planted and it grew. Again, we talk about roots and fruits here, right? And so you may not be dealing with the exact roots, you may be dealing with the fruits, but somewhere down the line, the seeds were planted, and ignorance is not bliss. Do you know your family history? Hi, welcome. Do you know your family history? One thing, and I'll say this, God started pointing me into giving me insight about things that was going on in my family, things I didn't even know what was going on in my family, right? And he was sharing insight with me of this is why your family struggles with this. And over there, that's where it started, right? And so I'm going to ask for you to consider. And a lot of times we don't like to go to family, we don't like to pull up history, but you cannot learn and do something different if you don't know where it came from. Again, it's a backstory. Okay. Backstories do not define your future, but backstory is needed to give you context. Do you know your family history? Again, why am I bringing up this up to leaders? Because it's time. You need to know your history so that you can have a different outcome. Now, look, I truly believe we encompass three things. We make up three components, like who we are, our makeup wise, is comprised of three things: biological genetics. There's going to be some things we just inherit from our family. There's going to be some personality traits, yes, and actually research shows that due to trauma, you can inherit DNA wise certain traits that are more prone to feeling the stress of trauma, or may be prone to enact or facilitate or engage in something that could be traumatic. So, one, we are a byproduct of our genetics. We can't escape that. Two, we are a byproduct of our environment and environmental exposure. Exposure. That's why family is so important, y'all. And I'll be real, this is why the enemy likes to use. In fact, it's not a matter of like using strangers a lot of times. Why would he use strangers when he can use people in your backyard? When he can use you? Let's be real. When he can use me? Let's be real, right? And so I want to say that. But three, and this is the thing, and this we're going to talk about tomorrow: personal decision making. We are a component of our genetics, our biology. Again, we are a component of our upbringing, our environmental exposure. We're also a byproduct of personal decisions. And we'll talk about this more tomorrow. But it's so important, though, to know your genetics and biology, know your history. Why does your family members act the way they act? Why do you do what they do? Why do you act the way you act? It could be traced to some biology, it could be traced to some environmental exposure. But I say this, and I'm going to leave on this, is you have to begin to address. First step, address your past pain. How long are you going to run? How long are you going to pretend it's not there? I want to encourage everyone, especially again, why am I putting this out to leaders? Because you have the opportunity at this time to begin to set a different path for the next generation. One thing I like sharing with my clients, especially as an affirmation, is this may seem similar, but it doesn't have to be the same. The cycle doesn't have to repeat, but you have to go back to what's been hunting you, and you have to go back to what's been hunting your family. That's the first key, is to being a leader, like a generational curse breaker in your family. All right. So, what I'm going to encourage you all to do tonight is I do want you to consider to sit down and look at any patterns. How you know the enemy works? He always works in patterns. There should always be some crumbs, some trails. The enemy leaves clues. Go sit down and look at some patterns. What is some stuff that you just see in your family? There are certain things that were just blatant within my family, y'all. It was so evident. I was like, wait a minute. And then I went back to the next generation. I'm like, what? They struggle with this too? Went back to the next generation. I went back. I was able to go back 3 generations, y'all. And I saw where it began. Go back and look at patterns within your family. And then this is where you have to be real. Where do you see that pattern within you? If you have children, what pattern do you not want to continue? If you don't have children, what pattern do you not want to continue for the next generation? And even if it's not within the family, we are called to influence society too. So what pattern do you want to stop by inserting into making sure it doesn't insert into society, into the community, okay, into your relationships and things like that. Okay. But I do want you guys to spend time looking at patterns and identifying that. You ain't got to know the why at this point. Like, why did this happen? But I do encourage you, because He abundantly gives information. So if you want to know why, just ask Him. Okay. Sit down and ask Him, and be willing and open to hear His response, because sometimes it'll shock you where He says things come from. But be willing to look at the patterns. So I want to leave with this for today. Your A, on how you begin to address and overcome the very trauma that's been plaguing your family for generations. You got to go back and address it. Pull it up. Where are you hiding? What's the family hiding? And I'm gonna be real. Sometimes family don't want to have tough conversations. I will encourage you with this: when you have conversations, you come out of curiosity, not out of judgment. But the family, I think, like, they do owe you. Like, I went to people and I asked, and it wasn't out of judgment, like, what happened? It was, I'm really curious, because I don't want to pull that into the next generation. Medical issues, like there's medical diseases, like, tell me your medical stuff. I need to know that, not to shame you, but it's because I want to know, you know. And so I'm going to leave off with that, y'all. Again, why would I bring this up to leaders? It's your time. It's your time to influence. It's your time to be impactful. You do not have to follow the same steps that were given. One thing as leaders, you always have more responsibility. I'm going to be real. Your consequence was always harsher. But that was because God put such a bigger load of responsibility on you. He gave you so much authority. Okay. So that's why I'm offering this to you as a female in leadership. All right. So I'm gonna leave on that today, and tomorrow we're gonna get into it because I want to go more into my personal, story and things like that, and we're just gonna continue on. But I hope that does y'all some good. It is Monday. We are done, and until next time, God willing, you all. God bless. Awesome, and on YouTube, Facebook, y'all. Good night. God